Again, my name is Darnell Allen. I'm a GIS specialist with the City of Raleigh. And today we're going to look at this tool and database that we're using called the MAR. And so we've got a short agenda for you today. We're not going to hold you long. So today's agenda, we're going to just take a little look at what addresses are, sort of get some background information on those. We'll look at what the address repository is. I'll kind of share with you just some of the partners that help develop this and get it up and running. We're going to look at some of the data. We'll look at some reasons to use the MAR and why it's beneficial. And then we'll get a chance to do a demo. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end for a few questions. So to start off and to sort of lay a foundation of what addresses are, you know, if you were to Google an address and you came across Merriam-Webster, they would say an address is a place where a person or organization may be communicated with. Well, I sort of like Oxford Dictionary just a little bit better. And I underlined a word that stood out to me, and that's the particulars of a place where someone lives or an organization is situated. To me, that sort of screams out detail or a little bit more information, a little clarity. And so today we're going to look at the Federal Geographic Data Committee, or commonly known as the FGDC. And their response is an address specifies a location by reference to a thoroughfare or landmark, or its specifics, or it specifies a point of postal delivery. And so thoroughfare is not meant to throw you off, but you're very common with a thoroughfare. It could be a road, it could be an alley, it could be a river. It's just some linear feature that we could use to assign addresses from. And so what I'll be presenting to you today will be some of the FGDC standards. The specific standard that we're utilizing in Wake County for our addresses is the United States Thoroughfare, Landmark, and Postal Address Data Standard. And if you really were to just think about all the towns and cities and jurisdictions all over the world or all over the US, they've been using address data perhaps over 100 years in some situations. And so the use of this standard allows us to break down addresses into smaller pieces and smaller chunks so we can share those pieces of data and utilize that data, and we can sort of all stay on one accord. We all have different business units within our jurisdictions that use those different pieces in different ways. And so we can manipulate and use those in a way that's suitable to everybody's needs. Now, the next couple of slides is just to get you all thinking a little bit, and maybe we can have a little fun with this. Do you recognize some of these addresses that I'm going to display for you? And you could put those in the chat if you recognize some of those. I think we all probably have a few addresses that we have committed to memory, probably your own home, or maybe a parent's home or a loved one's home. You might even, remember the address of where you work or your child's school. So everyone has some addresses that they are probably locked into memory. And you probably have some addresses, you might even have an emotion tied to that address. And so I'm just going to display a few. And if you know them, you can put it in the chat. But you probably recognize this address. Many of you will recognize it just from the number and the street. You'll recognize that as the White House. Or the second one, we have Thanksgiving is coming up, but right after that, we've got Christmas. So we've got kids all over the world. That's probably going to be sending a Dear Santa letter to this address. Or you may recognize this one, maybe the name gives it away. As a Virginia native, I think every 4th or 5th grader in public school probably makes a trip at some point to the Monticello. So that's that address. Then the last one here, maybe for some music fans out there that are already knew this address on site, then others may not know that address, but maybe you can relate to a landmark like Neverland and associate that with Michael Jackson. Here's a few others, sort of some addresses that are more internationally known. To top one there is the New York Stock Exchange. The second is the related to the Pope, that's his residence. The third is the office and residence of the Prime Minister. And the last one there is the Eiffel Tower. So I'm hoping there you could already start to recognize some of the elements that make up an address, and you'll start to see and recognize those a little bit more as we go individually on some of those elements. But here's one I wanted to throw you all a little bit of a curveball. And so this, just a short piece of this address probably means different things to different pieces. I would imagine, depending on where you're tuned in from today, maybe your particular town has could have this address existing in it. It seems like any town USA has a North Main Street or Main Street, right? So this probably means different things to different people, or you may recognize it or you may not recognize it. What I found very interesting is that there are actually 4 occurrences of this address in Wake County alone. So imagine the number of occurrences that you might have for this address across the state of North Carolina, over 100 counties. I would dare say we probably have 50 occurrences of this address. Or imagine if a call came through to an E911 operator in Wake County and they're having to dispatch Wake EMS. You can see how critical it is to have the correct address to route this call appropriately. So that helps, I think that helped to identify some address elements already. And this I'm pulling straight from the FGDC standard. I'll give a disclaimer. I'm not going to go over every element in the FGDC DC standards. There's a ton of them. I'm not even going to go over every element within a particular subgroup. If you feel like you want some good reading tonight, you can certainly just Google their website and you can find all their standards. But I think some key ones that we can look at, for instance, are the address number elements. We have certain parts that make up a complete address number. For instance, the prefix, and then you have the number, and then the suffix. For example, you probably have seen an address like 100 Main Street, and then you've maybe seen a 100A Main Street or 100.5 Main Street. That would be an example of a number with a suffix added to it. And then there's also street name elements. You've probably seen lots of these different pieces, and all of them are not even listed there. But you've seen things like pre-directionals in our 302 North Main Street. The N, the north, is the pre-directional. You may have seen pre-types. If you would imagine, if you've seen a road realignment project where a road has been realigned and then there's a new portion of that road, you may see one part labeled as Old Main Street or New Main Street. The old or the new would be the pre-type. And then the street name itself would be Main. Post type would be street in this example. Interesting fact there is the United States Postal Service recognizes over 200 post types, commonly known as street types. That's going to depend on the jurisdiction. I think Wake County as a whole, we're probably utilizing somewhere between 40 and 45 different post types. And you probably have seen a post directional at some point. An example would be Main Street Southwest, or you see some directional added to the end. So you combine all those elements together, you would get a complete street name. Then you have elements like the subaddress. A subaddress, we've seen them before. It's sort of a space inside of a space. And so just think about your office building. Maybe each floor has a different tenant on it. So each floor is a suite. Or if you have a shopping center with many different stores, they're all different units or suites. Or an apartment building, perhaps. The different apartments are different subaddresses. And so those items make up a complete subaddress. Then you go on and you have things pretty common: the place, the state, the country name elements. I think those speak for themselves. The Postal Service has postal address elements. Those would be things like your P.O. box or lots of different elements there. And on top of all those things, you have different attributes. And so you imagine the first set of items we talked about, if you've mailed a piece of a letter or received a letter, you've seen the mailing address on the outside, you've pretty much have seen or experienced those different parts of addresses. But there's different parts and attributes that are captured that you may not be aware of. For instance, in this case, an address ID. This could be a unique identifier for every single address. We're capturing things like the address authority. Who has the authorization to make edits to that address, to change that address, to they have the authorization to do any of those items. That would be the city or the jurisdiction. Then you're capturing things like the coordinates. You're also capturing things like what parcel is tied to this address. All different address attributes. Some others are classifications or feature type, life cycle status, and we'll look at these a little bit further. But in short, feature type could be things like, what type of address is this? Is it a parcel? Is it a meter? Is it a residential structure? Is it a cell tower? And life cycle would be, is it an active address? Is it retired? Is it reserved? So we'll look at more of that in our demo. And so hopefully from all these different slides, you're starting to see the different parts of an address. And to those folks that are on the call today that deal with addresses every single day, we sort of adopted a mind state and a frame of mind. And we use this quote from time to time that addresses are more than just numbers. There's so much more to an address. So hopefully the next time you're riding down the street and you're looking at addresses, you'll think a little bit differently about those. So now that we've set the stage of what addresses are, let's talk a little bit about this master address repository. And I did want to just acknowledge a few of our partners. Hopefully they're on today. We have Colleen Sharp. Colleen Sharp is a senior consultant with Spatial Focus. Now, Spatial Focus, I would consider them a front runner in developing address repositories. They've worked with a number of cities and counties and communities to develop these databases and systems. Colleen, a little backstory, she was a long time employee with the city of Raleigh before she retired. And so she's seen this master address repository that I'll just call MAR for short. She's seen it come full circle. She's been there from its inception and early planning to the implementation and execution. So I think she's rather pleased with where we are with this. Robert Appleby, he's the president of RGA and Associates. Robert has created some custom tools that we're using on our ArcGIS extension to maintain our data. He's also developed some web tools and some ArcPro tools that help with this. David Hunt is the GIS Public Safety Data Manager for Wake County, and Wake County is currently hosting our MAR, and so that team is instrumental in the administration and maintenance of our MAR, and so I appreciate all of them. They've made a great system that I get to just use up every day, which makes my job a lot easier. So I did pull this sort of line just straight from Spatial Focus. In their definition of an address repository, they say it's a method of providing standardized data from a single central database to all data, excuse me, for all address data for a city, county, state, or country. Pardon me for one moment. And I really like this definition because it is a standardized data across the whole county. It's one data set, and it's a combination of all sorts of data. And so you might ask, what type of data went into the creation of the MAR? And so we pull data from all sorts of sources. Wake County parcel data and CAMA data was a major contributor because they're collecting data across the whole county. Utility billings is another good source. We've got customers out there that are utilizing water, utilizing solid waste services, trash collection. The Board of Elections is a good source of address data. And of course, some of the smaller towns are collecting their own data and keeping their own data. You've got other sources. And so the idea behind that is to collect as much data as possible. You compare all that data, and then you create one base data set. And sort of the benefits of doing that hopefully are obvious, but you've got as much data as possible. You can sort of fill in the gaps where one source is lacking a little bit. You can compare the data where you may have 3 or 4 sets that say that address is 100 Main Street, but another set said it's 100 Main Court. And so now you can sort of weed out and help others sort of clean up their data as well. So I still haven't answered the question, what is a master address repository? It's a couple things. It's some tabular data. And this is just a screen grab of some of the data points that we're collecting. It's not all of them. There's so much more behind the scenes. But in this particular instance, we're looking at the address of 200 North Blunt Street. That may ring a bell with some of you, and you may be familiar with that location, but maybe not. And so wouldn't it be nice to now tie that to a geospatial data? Let's tie that to a point on the ground. And so the MAR is exactly that. It's all this tabular data that's been collected and standardized for an address, and it's tied to a physical point on the ground. And so we're using our GIS systems to locate those points and know everything there is to know about those points. So for my folks that are on that are very excited about data, let's start to see what this MAR is starting to look like. And so this screen grab here, I want to give some kudos to David Hunt from Wake County. He provided me these, just a snapshot of a shapefile point layer. This shows the MAR address points sort of in its early stages. And originally the MAR was going to be in support of a new permitting system that the Raleigh launched last summer. And so that new permitting system was really a map-based system. It was going to be consuming address points. And so we needed some service that could display those points. The permitting text could go out and validate against these addresses. So originally it was mostly Raleigh data, the city of Raleigh points, as well as the different service areas that the city of Raleigh provides water for. And so early on, you can see somewhat of a silhouette of Wake County. But over the last couple of months, beginning in September, things really got hot and heavy, and there was multiple deliveries to fill in the rest of the county. So early part of September, there was a huge delivery that sort of filled in the eastern and northern parts of the county. As you can see, it started to take shape, some of the towns that were included in those deliveries. The end of September, you see the southern and southwestern portions starting to fill in. And then our last delivery at the end of October, you see the last few portions that took shape. And so I know you're wanting some numbers. So we're going to look at a dashboard really quick. And here's some data that was just pulled. I pulled this data probably about 2 weeks ago. What you can see there are total address points in the MAR currently, or just 2 weeks ago, is getting pretty close to 630,000. This number is a moving target. We're constantly adding points to account for new development, new subdivisions, new apartments, filling in data that we may have never even known about before. So this number is always increasing. You can sort of see the breakdown across the jurisdictions, where those points and who has the authority over those points. And of course, we know that city jurisdiction and town jurisdiction don't stop at the county lines. So we do have some instances, for example, town of Cary that spills over into Chatham, or City of Raleigh, that's over in Durham County. So you can see those as well. So why use a master address repository? I think one of the main things that have been gained from this whole ordeal is just the level of collaboration that's come from it. We realize, on a county level, from town to town, there's probably some duplication of efforts. We're all collecting some of the same data points. And so it'd be nice to share this data. It's nice to have all this data in a standardized set, and it's centralized. And what that does is it enables all of us from our each jurisdiction. We now have one authoritative source for all of our address data. And this opens up the door for all sorts of possibilities. And we won't go into all of them, but we've got opportunities to integrate our MAR data with other business systems. Other business systems are starting to recognize our data, and they're wanting to merge our data with theirs. A great example would be public utilities, for instance. They have been collecting address data for a long time. And so they want to make sure that the address points and address data they have connected with their accounts is an accurate account or an accurate address. So they want to look over our shoulder and see what we have for that instance. Imagine the 911 implications. If we're capturing all these address points, we could place them on a centroid of a building footprint. Or if it's a shopping center, we could put an address point of where that door is to that space. And so imagine if we were to link up with 911, that could be some great opportunities there. And of course, you can pull all sorts of analysis from these points and even do some mailing lists. Now, it sounds so simple, but when you think about the potential and how much stuff is growing in Wake County, and for an example would be a planning department may want to send out a notice to every neighbor of an adjoining vacant lot within 100 feet. Well, previously, maybe some of our capabilities were limited. Maybe we didn't know about that apartment. Maybe we didn't know the apartment building next door. We didn't know all the units in that building. So at best, we could only send it to the owner of the complex. And oh, by the way, that owner lives in California. So they're probably not all that interested about what's happening. They may or may not. But with the addition of a master address repository and now knowing every single unit in that apartment building, now we can send a Dear Resident letter to all 100 people that live in that apartment. So the time has come and we must now do a little demo. We've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to show you some of the tools. So what I have here is just our ArcGIS desktop application, and I'm going to be using some of the tools that were created by Robert Appleby. And you can see from our tools there, we can start to capture some of those elements that we talked about earlier. For instance, I hover over this field. We can collect the address prefixes. We can collect the number. We can collect suffixes. We can collect life cycles. We can, say if this point is active or reserved. So just looking at the reserve, just think about the implications there. You could go ahead and start to map out a full subdivision even before it's ever recorded and make changes as need be. You can put types, the feature types, and collect that. Are these features parcels? Are they utilities? Are they parking garages? Is it a mail kiosk? Is it a sign? And all these items could be tailored to meet your needs. And so this here is just a subdivision that's taking shape in North Raleigh. And so the beautiful thing about this application is the folks that are using and leveraging this data, for instance, the permitting department, they can sort of use these maps to get some cues on what they should be doing with their permitting. If they happen to, and they've started to take a liking to all these different symbologies that we're using, for instance, these A's are active residential structure and the green dots are all parcels. So as permits are coming in for a particular address, we can relocate these address points to the building footprint. We can change those feature types from a parcel to a residential structure, so on and so forth. Let's go to maybe another one. We're starting to run out of time a little bit. I'll go to another quick area real fast. The address manager tool also allows you to look at sub-addresses all in one location. And so in this case, I'm looking at this particular shopping center building, and I can view all the sub-addresses that are a part of that. And I can see the different suites. I can view things like the street center line and see what range is on that street. This is the 1100 block. And so real quickly, the tools help to take out some of the error, the human error that might occur. If I'm using the tools properly, it'll prevent me from creating a 1200 address on this 1100 block. It'll prevent me from creating an address on the wrong side of the street. And so Robert's tools are also helping us to monitor the overall health of our system. I really could probably go on with this about another 30 minutes, but I got about 3 minutes left, so I better stop. And if we've got any questions, Katie, I will entertain those.
Awesome, thank you so much, Darnell. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to, I see one question. Is access to the master address repository publicly available?
Currently, it is not. We still have some cleanup that we're doing. We're coming off of a few deliveries. We still know we have some anomalies in our system. For instance, the things that I just talked about. We know that there's some legacy addresses out there that are on the wrong side of the street or on the wrong block range, or just right now, they're not even on the correct parcel. So we're constantly monitoring and maintaining and QAing and QCing to get this database as efficient and as clean as we can. But I do imagine at some point, there could be some level of public access to it.
Awesome. And then you have one other question. I would like to understand how your system connects to the national database address.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that, Katie?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. So this person would like to understand how your system connects to the national database address, if applicable.
I will say I don't have an answer for that one right now, but I do have my contact information up there, and I'd be glad to try to research that a little more. But I do appreciate the questions.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, one more quick question. Who is responsible for updating the MAR with new addresses or street name changes?
That's all of that is maintained by the different jurisdictions. Currently, right now, City of Raleigh staff is using it, Wake County staff is using it, but it's going to be available to all the different towns. We're still a little ways out from doing that. So right now, primarily, Wake County is doing a lot of the maintenance for all the other towns. In the City of Raleigh, it's myself and my colleague Justin. And so, like I say, it's something going on daily. You're adding something daily or fixing something daily.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Darnell. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Katie.